Thank you, Em. Welcome, everyone. This is a very exciting evening for us, and I'm Meg Weston. I'm standing in for Jefferson Nowicki. Jefferson was really the central organizer of the afternoon workshop and this evening's event. And but when it got delayed because of last week's snowstorm, he couldn't be here tonight. So he asked me to read his introduction for him. So I'm going to take one quick sidestep, if you will. I'm a member of the Millay House Board, but also of the Camden Festival of Poetry. And I just wanted to mention the festival has a Poet of Promise Award for high school poets. So if you know any of those, I would encourage you to take a flyer from the table and submit poems for that award, which will be announced at the festival, and the award winner receives a $250 prize. So on to tonight. The seed for this series began last year at the Edna St. Vincent Millay birthday poetry reading at the Farnsworth, where poet Gary Lawless recited Millay's rousing, inspirational poem, Conscientious Objector. And since it's short, and since Jefferson was going to read it, I'm going to do my best in reading it now for you. It was written in 1934. I shall die, but that is all I shall do for death. I hear him leading his horse out of the stall. I hear the clatter on the barn floor. He is in haste. He has business in Cuba, business in the Balkans, many calls to make this morning. But I will not hold the bridle while he clinches the girth. And he may mount by himself. I will not give him a leg up. Though he flick my shoulders with his whip, I will not tell him which way the fox ran. With his hoof on my breast, I will not tell him where the black boy hides in the swamp. I shall die, but that is all I shall do for death. I am not on his payroll. I will not tell him the whereabout of my friends, nor of my enemies either. Though he promised me much, I will not map him the route to any man's door. Am I a spy in the land of living that I should deliver men to death? Brother, the password and plans of our city are safe with me. Never through me shall you be overcome. And the title of our series, the Never Through Me Shall You Be Overcome LGBTQ Poetry Series readings, is taken from the last line of that poem. In the poem, Millay makes plain her allegiance to those under threat of violence and oppression and commits herself to solidarity and struggle. Particularly in this time of escalating threats to the LGBTQ community, we feel strongly that part of our responsibility in preserving Millay's legacy is to uplift LGBTQ voices and to offer a place of refuge and support for youth. In support of this series, I'd like to thank Jefferson Nowicki and the Millay House Rockland Board, especially Ann Morris, Diane Norton, Michelle Gifford, and Kathy Onofrio? How do you pronounce Onofrio? For their enthusiastic assistance with the grant application that made this all possible. And a special thanks to Jefferson's partner, Sarah, whose great idea it was in the first place. So we're in for a special treat tonight. Poet and multi-genre master Arisa White will read for us. But first, we're very lucky that Maine's Poetry Out Loud State runner-up Willow Knowles from Kennebunk High School has agreed to recite a poem for us. Willow is currently a junior at Kennebunk High School. She enjoys cooking, linguistics, and a good cup of tea. She doesn't know what she plans on doing in the future, but she's currently trying to learn too many languages at once, and she'd love to travel the world. So that's a good start for a poet and for traveling. And Willow will recite Happy Hour by Leanne Roripaw. Willow.
Happy Hour by Leanne Roripaw. I always forget the name Delphinium, even though it was the flower the hummingbirds loved best. They came in pairs, sleek, emerald bright heads, the clockwork machinery of their blurred wings thrumming swift, menacing engines. They slipped their beaks as if they were swizzle sticks, deep into the blue throat of Delphinium, sucked dry the nectar-chilled hearts like goblets full of sweet, frozen daiquiri. I liked to sit on the back porch in the evenings, watching them and eating Spanish peanuts, rolling each nut between thumb and forefinger to rub away the red, salty skin like brittle tissue paper, until the meat emerged, gleaming, yellow like old ivory, smooth as polished bone. And late August, after exclamations of gold flowers, tiny and bitter, the caragana trees would let down their beans to ripen, dry, and rupture. At first, there was the soft drum of popcorn, slick with oil, puttering somewhere in between seed, heat, and cloud. And then sharp cracks, like capgun, or diminutive fireworks, caragana peas catapulting skyward like pellet missiles. Sometimes a meadowlark would lace the night air with its elaborate melody, rippling and sleek as a black satin ribbon. Sometimes there would be a falling star. And because this happened in Wyoming, and because this was my parents' house, and because I'm never happy with anything at any time, I always wished that I was somewhere, anywhere else but here.
Wow, that was amazing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Now I get to introduce our poet reader who did the workshop for the students this afternoon as well. Arisa White is a Cave Canem Fellow, a Sarah Lawrence College alumna, and an MFA graduate from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. She co-authored with Laura Atkins, Biddy Mason Speaks Up, a middle grade biography in verse about the midwife and philanthropist, Bridget Biddy Mason, which is the second book in the Fighting for Justice series. Biddy Mason Speaks Up was awarded the Focal Award, Maine Literary Award for Young People's Literature, the Nautilus Book Award Gold Medal for middle grade nonfiction, and the Independent Publisher Book Award Silver Medal for multicultural juvenile nonfiction. Biddy Mason Speaks Up is now part of the New York City Department of Education's Mosaic curriculum. Arisa is also the author of the poetic memoir, Who's Your Daddy? And she co-edited the anthology, Home is Where You Queer Your Heart. In collaboration with composer Jessica Jones, Arisa is working on Postpardon, the opera, which will premiere in 2025. Looking forward to that. Arisa is an associate professor in English and creative writing at Colby College and serves as a community advisory board member for the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance. So please join me in a warm welcome for Arisa White.
Thank you. It was also a pleasure to be in Malay's house and facilitate a workshop with young folks. So thank you for that energy. I'm also like, what do I read? I've been writing a bunch of new stuff and sort of, I guess, in the spirit of vulnerability and saying the unsayable. I'll start with those pieces because they're fresh. And we'll see where we go from there. It's also a revision process for me as well to hear this stuff out loud in front of people and to have it bounce off of your bodies. And so then I know if it's right, you know? I inserted my truth inside and acted like a mule. Twice my crotch and ass set airport security on alert. I need to be careful of the victims of the falling, how I pre-position them to put their arms out and spread their legs, and I talk my way through my touching, the back of the hand rimming her waist and the shucking of her thighs. She is free to go where gravity pulls her, hood north or lips longitudinal. I said I want to be a wild goat when really I want to sow my wild oats, but all of those vowels make me lose control of my tongue. I too feel the wings of love, the boldness of a hawk in a peacock's glamour. I sit in the brick and mortar of childhood memories and every word is melting in my mouth and she is not near to taste me. I don't give a damn about what will conclude this descent in whichever phase of water and earth may greet me. Gems, minerals, and fossil fools are the result of this kind of heart and heartbreaking. Resting on her shoulder in the windshield shows us the way downtown to the bridge to where I was born. I want you to breathe it too, the air of my first breath, the reminder of how to assemble and usher into whole. There are these drops I acknowledge that can be my own tears or that of another cloud. It was more than the cute Tiffany who had her charms on me. It is the final stitch woven from this place that astonishes all the O's out of you, the pericardium of the one. And I was abundantly circular about it, and still they come from my ass, for the threat an ass can incur, for the fantasy it embarks on, for its transformation into fruit. And we know the apple pomegranate that beholds the eye, for she is troubling these waters with the warm scalpel of her body. Waves can't keep her from the loose skin of birch, easily mistaken for nothing. She's washing off her father's face and her smile made more ludus, but her chewed cheeks and ground wisdom are her own injuries to be recorded. I needed her words affirming, and those were rare and hard between. There was no way I could live sadistically attached to a till of receipts in her stone that attracted bagless dwellers, flesh eaters who won't brave the crispy skin for a chili dip. For my deep craving that clawed my mother's throat, and I was a storm of bees until thrown a drumstick. It's clear that you can feel me. I'm beating my chest to resuscitate the evening we first met. Your hands showing all its veins and fingers manicured to a fuck. This is what you get. I push and pull my sacrifice toward you. A whole grown woman in her army knife, an unregenerate liver, a lake fire rippling mid-back, a knuckle too stubborn to take off a promise. You're welcome to check for a pulse and tally my demerits. I'm giving every best effort since words don't mean shit, these spasms singing grace in my lumbar. I have survived the supermarket today, all for macaroni salad and crab meat and a half pound of fiddleheads. I am alive to bring you my hot heart, its juicy liberation, reacting to the sudden foreseeable air. This is love, culpable at your address. This is sacred, the anchor, waterless and without vessel, useless to use, illogically here and precisely as we are. How it fits in the mouth. There are parts in me without place. Accessories for womanhood hang on the doorknob. She slips from a layer of defenses, freshly showered, licks water from her wrist, wants to know, do you love me? Do you? I have learned to keep my erections out of conversations, but it's odd to stutter on the body's welcome mats. I hold my breath to put kisses where kisses happen, stroke her arms as if they will lead to a place tropical. I run my tongue along the circumference of another day, because in the end, the Black body is never believed. To my regret, I'm fixed to her want, suckling. I sepal and stem and river and do what is elemental. Our propensity for traumas and trips makes me electric, wet and wasted, capable of standing for so little. And when the math of her is gone from my sheets, and I feel a fly and wire in my mouth, it is now I understand the lure I am and why I never take the hook out. This one I wrote yesterday. So occasionally I'll join this online group called the Daily Grind. And the whole idea is that you just write a poem every day. No comments, it's just like showing up for the poem, you know? No title. We cut living blocks of ice from the frozen lake to keep our religion wet, our practice watered. And despite the colonial history that keeps us in our comfort, we will pray for light that didn't come from the wound, that our bodies didn't become windows for peering, and the soul remains private behind the flesh, which has been assigned tribe and race, has been marked human or for dead. Let us give the clay the thirst we will keep to remind us from which we came, from the suffering that sustains the empire, that hardens the eye and person into a late stage, for which we become fluent in rubble and industrialized dust, turning children into ghosts before their time, voices air-stricken and starved, the land into a stock of bones for which the victor will salivate and inherit. In a reasonable amount of time. So I've started dating again after a divorce, and I joined a dating app, and it's horrible, okay? Oh my God, okay, in a reasonable amount of time. Text me back within the hour. Otherwise, you make a bad bitch feel like grits without taste, a city without its early morning reprise of joggers. Born from blunt and smoke, you're a familiar trick I play on myself. On this return, I have more tools than a screwdriver. This is my 7th transmutation. You inside of me is the waterfall's surrender, the applause of cedars, all the sway of cattails. I have a list and a heart beating too fast for you. You were never in my orbit and you called me back. I'm speechless my first time in space. I am in July and you are in June. I fit you into these 15 minutes before a meeting about federal grants and their specific guidelines. Drop my croissant, pay the clerk no mind, and tap the green phone. I leave my debit card to sit in the luxury of your voice. Tell me how you feel with a verb and horizon. I need depth to secure my succulence. You, my dear, are so handsome, I'm spring. I've lost the ground I stand on. Spend weeks suspended in a wind tunnel, in a blue noise that keeps me from autumn. As close to the North Star as I can go, a lesbian living in slipper socks, flannel shirt and work boots, rugged gear to shovel toddler-high snow, de-ice walkways so the postman doesn't slip scrawling icicles on our envelopes. The news isn't against me. Invisibility isn't as sensational without violence. Clearly, in this afterlife, no one sees the sorry lingerie ghosting in this deathbed. Through these pains, a poster child for the opioid epidemic is windblown, breath of his nightmares radon in air. The Army vet installing our mitigation system says lesbians on tour were falsely reporting rape. No transition from PVC pipes to missives from the field, except for the grammar of our marriage. My vow to her vowel is an Afghani in his eye. We are not modern in our naming. Already implied in our carpet munching is nonconformity. The fluidity of our scissoring is mermaidic. They cannot see this loving versus United States when the bill comes. Yes, we are together. When cashiers want to check us out, I'm living in the bulldagger of my mind. I bank on love she manumits. Our problem is we can't see ourselves on the same team. I have incredulously high standards, but however you look at it, I'm essentially her slave. I'm at my worst when I transmute myself into the shape of everyone's void. We don't look at it, and the chip took over the windshield in a web. Each crack led to removal. We talk self-esteem, assume it's invulnerably high, and no one is lowering the sky. Analogies have been absurd when it comes to my suffering. All her complaints are from the Department of Black Stereotypes. This is the secret. The language requires me as sugar honey to her human julep. It's refreshing to be free of denouement when there is no self to recover or body to bury back. If I ever thought my consent was inalienable, there are rings and chains to illustrate the homophonics of ownership. It is not by choice we are here. We arrived at the same time, and that time is historical. I'm trapped in the film that cues in the eyes of those who behold us a graphic imaginary so white it blinds. In any case, what becomes instructed is I am the nigger, and she's the lover while sitting in our living room. While walking down the street, she releases my hand when a policeman approaches and I'm fugitive and forfeited. I belong to a flying people, no earth to carry me down. With so many planets in her 8th house, my social death is a bite of a strange plum. Fleshy and gardenia, we make it our symbol. Because the joke is, I stole her purse, and the crowd is coming to her assistance and coming for my punishment. In those mitotic seconds, I'm a trusted spectacle of cheap intimacy in a world with incomplete sunshine. Another very, very new one. In the comforts of my company, I have the Jamaica Kincaid urge to seek the scent of my cunt, that exquisite way I purr into a room. Luxuriate as if seaside and horizon always being the tease, but these waves with their predictable highs and lows cease lapping. All this to say, I am a free woman now, and a spiritual medium saw Harriet Tubman by my side, which means there was no turning back. Clarity is a singular truth that illuminates corners that make you feel some shame. I stop polishing the mirror and look without distraction, critique, or correction. Ego is a box stamped fragile, and I am that. On these linen sheets, deep in my inner world, into the clay, into love's darkest part. Okay, I guess this is an eclipse poem. My uterus has been responding to these lunar and solar eclipses by laying me down in my bed. Cramps of the highest Scoville units, thunderous and driving stalactites. Breathing through peaks and valleys, attention turned inward, I learned to see in the dark. Street lights come on, temperature drops, it is twilight in this 3 o'clock hour. Lulled into quiet babble, the Kennebec rushing mild. 2 ducks glide to shore and I feel the sun lift off my shoulders, coldly dramatic and brief. If you blinked, it was over. Totality left me here with my own body, bleeding and causal, unsure how to unlock the full magic of this stardust, unable to shake the fidgety girl stroking her greasy hair, her 2 big mud boots clopping down Main Street like a Clydesdale, making this entire moment a triggering town where the mass shooter of this girl's fears aims for my family jewels, and the bullet is no angrier than my ovaries at this country's heartlessness, greed and strategy, armed forces and genocide, so much more redacted for our ignorance. Those future eyes will puzzle over our history and ask, how could they let that happen? And I cannot explain for the life of me why blood stains deep in the fabric. Best way out is through. I'm pulling further from your porch, not turning around, I'm moving towards grief. A long thorn stuck between my knuckles for days. Every fight is a reach to the bone. Disappointment can settle me into prayer. What this deep affection has done in the face of your density is show the saboteur moonwalking. I have no qualms about erasing God's sandprints. It's ancestral to blast these moody pop songs, fashion a belt to keep my cargo from exposing my junk. Every pocket filled to the stitch with California poppies. 3 drops daily with water to flower. Sirens go by and I'm reminded I'm not Thoreau. I eat shoulder to shoulder with the fear of my rejection. Each owl is excited by my presence and terrifies me. Where's the tavern of our first kiss? You glimmered brighter when not defensive, held my hand and our hands bridged between us. All was broken and eagled into song. We treated anything anybody said as a collective utterance. And yeah, okay, so those are the new things. Do I have time still to read, or should I be done? Okay. So, yeah, okay. Once upon a time, I wrote a poetic memoir called Who's Your Daddy? That took about 12 years to write. It started pretty much on my 33rd birthday when my mom, she said, it's your Jesus year. And so she gave me an address to write my father in Guyana. And I was estranged from him for by that time, like 30 plus years. So last memory is like somewhere around 3 years old. So basically I got this grant. I was living in California, the Bay Area at the time. So I got a grant. I was able to do a series of community workshops on epistolary writing to absent fathers, patriarchal figures. It was the time of the 2016 election. So people had a lot of things to say at that time. And so I wound up getting these letters from as far as the Philippines, inmates from San Quentin. So I wound up using some of those letters to create collage poems called Cintos in the collection. Then I also traveled to Guyana, where I met my father, spent 2 weeks there, and that was an experience. And so out of this whole kind of journey came Who's Your Daddy? So what I'll do is I'll read from section 3, and this is basically the point where the journey kind of begins in some ways. And so each section opens, there's 4 sections, and they open with proverbs, Guyanese proverbs. And so section 3, the proverb is, woman reign is never done. And so the kind of translation for that is, a nagging woman can be an endless irritant. My mother says she has an address in Guyana. You want to write your father. It is through inflection she makes her directives questions. She doesn't intonate high, just enough so her implicit meaning isn't lost to freedom of personal choice. I feel my face up against the bluest door, and it's about to open. It was Avery, Gerald's youngest brother, who gave my mother the address when she ran into him in Brooklyn one weekend. I meet Avery over the phone. This is my uncle. He lives in Queens, New York. He has a son, my cousin, and I'm branching out in ways that make me anxious. I'm thinking more people to be accountable to, more expectations to navigate, more care to give. His voice is commanding when he calls me Arise, says it in capital letters, reminds me of the direction I must go. Avery tells me Gerald has many children, maybe 10, and he's been trying to unite us, help us get to know his family, my family. I'm unsure and hesitant, feel overwhelmed, and say, when I'm ready, I will. At some point in our short conversation, he informs me we are descendants from a maroon colony in Venezuela. Later, he emails me a list of names and birth dates that include half-brothers and half-sisters, uncles and aunts, some living in places like Tennessee and Arizona. One uncle died in the late 1970s. Gerald is a Leo. His mother recently passed, my grandmother, and my grandfather is dead too. died when Gerald was 11 years old. I'm not invited to know much about my father's family because the family is concerned I'll write about them. Avery told me this. They keep the black boy magic from me. My father's family bequeathed what Gerald started. In the 10th year of his life, he wrapped his words mute. These words are tight-lipped cowries I pitched to the ground just to get inside. They keep the black boy magic from me. It's an unexplored complement that is active, and I do not know its properties. Throws me off kilter, like one leg is shorter than the other and caught in a whirlpool. I have a gangster swagger, my stress foot dipping, 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 and turning up wet. I find and friend another Gerald child on Facebook. My Facebook sister, who is by nature half my sister, but nothing nurtured these halves. She went to my high school 3 years after I graduated the High School of Economics and Finance. In one message, she says she has very little to say about Gerald, near nil information to give. I wasn't checking for him like that. She has no longing to know her father. She is soon to have a child and take selfies that show her baby bump. I find and friend a second Gerald child on Facebook. My Facebook brother, who's by nature half my brother, but nothing nurtured these halves, is 5 years younger. In a series of messages, we set up a phone call. Bryce tells me Gerald was deported for battering his daughter's boyfriend. This boyfriend was beating her, attempting to kill her. Was there a gun? My Facebook brother doesn't know, but Gerald was charged with a felony. For this third strike, he was sent back home to Guyana. And I envy my half-sister for that moment she felt her boyfriend topple from her, relief from abuse, and she entered the cove of Gerald's care. I'm noticing lately fathers with daughters. Of the pictures my mother gave me, I don't have a proper portrait of Gerald. So much chiaroscuro, not enough good. The Polaroid sends cracks through his face. His dark skin absorbs all the light and features aren't distinct. The windows into his soul are shadowed. I'm on his shoulders. We stand tall as the buildings in the distance. My toddler face squints at the sun. Neither one of us is really seeing. My mother gave me a dirt road, a house in a township with a tin roof that makes music from all things fallen, in a country of many waters, where the man whose sea nymph surname represents the beauty and bounty of the sea. I write my father at this address. Dear Gerald, I am Denise's daughter, and this is the dream I had of you. The sky ingratiates the sea and is as blue as it desires. This is the backdrop as a car drives us down a natural road, flat lands and wind cleared. Before us, a city glints. Your right nostril comes into view, a fine etched keloid web. I touch and something is lit in me. Your irises pitch black in a mouth-feel silence where a bond used to be. Do you remember I bear the name you conjured, its attention turned to your shorelines, to the father missing in us both? I was born on the cusp of fish and fire, 5 months after Jonestown in a county of kings. I now live with my girlfriend in California, and the state is experiencing a drought. The more I notice each season brings an extreme. Why weren't you my summer? I watch a housewife on TV tell how, on a visit to her father's, she lost her leg at 6 to a farm machine. She's beautiful, looks like a horse, but in her head, she's missing a leg. Every time she talks, you can see the image she has of herself. You see how animal she's become. in her fear that she doesn't belong. We will see it, her good foot, and wonder why God allowed this to happen. Question, where was the father? Soon to come, off performing noble cliches. Little girl I was, thought you were love by way of disappearing. I have been a screen for gazing, allowing the bigger picture to eat the smaller picture. You're one of the classic oldies reeled from my heartbreak. I cheated in my last relationship and my feelings coalesced for you. That girl, Chow Me, full of so much fight and sorrow, is tail chasing in a scapegoated posture a perfumer would call fecal. I'm tired of feeling like shit. Blurred vision from spinning. I cannot clearly see my belonging. And I will close with this one. So this is like now moving into section 4 where I finally go to Guyana. But I'll close on this one. D-I-F-G, H-D-I-F-G, D-I-F-G, H-D-I-F-G. Do I forgive him? Do I forgive? What if the question, what is forgiveness, is my own need to solicit an apology, to put a mouth and throat in all the systems that make a body talk onto something I cannot touch, so it can give me sound that bounces off my contours, that let me know I am here, a living beat. What if forgiveness is a matter of breaking up syllables, then arranging the word with a whole new set of feet? What if can you forgive him is a means to end the contrast, is a way to ask for our bodies to be proximal? In that asking, I'm proposing that a knowledgeable skill exists, that maybe all the tools we need become real through use. What if this protected reality I made with imagination is let go, and with the release I've accepted wildness? The proverb says that it's better to have one bird in hand instead of two in the bush. The release will leave me birdless. What if the father isn't the answer, and I've been seeing it all wrong? There is an unequivocal honesty to Gerald's absence. It is reliable and transparent and hasn't done or said otherwise. Can't I see that? What I know is that absence breeds madness. An irreconcilable relationship you know is there but can't call it by its name, can't leave it because it's a tree with its root collar breathing around your neck. What if poetry is how I practice my relationship with my whole body? Bodies unknown and not yet born, bodies past, future bodies, bodies present. The father and mother of my poems are two pearls I nacre at any point in time. Thank you. Yeah, questions. I have questions.
I don't know if I need a mic in this small room. But maybe for your whatever. I was wondering that beautiful memoir in verse that you read from, you said it took you 12 years to write. And what's your usual poetry practice? Do things take a a while to develop. I mean, you read a lot of new poems. Are you prolific in your writing, or what's your practice look like?
I think there's a few things. I am pretty much, I'm not necessarily opposed, like, you must write every day. Because I see writing as not just necessarily sitting down, which is the important part for sure, but also being still and practicing attention, noticing, and in that noticing, feeling it and jotting some ideas down and reading and revising. So I'm always doing something that's going to feed the writing in some kind of way. And then there are times when I sort of feel constipated in myself energetically, and that's when I know I need to probably do something every day. And so that's often when I'll join this online group, the Daily Grind, just to kind of like, you know, just give myself some kind of prompt, some kind of thing to show up for. And also it helps me lower the stakes, right? So it's not like, oh my God, when I sit down, I have to write the most brilliant poem because I've been not doing it for so long. So then I put so much pressure on the final product that, all of these feelings get in the way. And sometimes those feelings just are annoying. I just want to be in the process. So I think by having, this sort of time when I'm doing something on a daily basis, it allows me to just like relax around my creativity. And then, oftentimes I may have something where I just return to and start writing again. So I'll give myself like a revision thing to work on, just slowly, a little bit day by day. I love to take time to retreat for at least a month when I know I do want to start something big, right? So I'm wanting to work on another sort of poetic narrative, like a heroine's journey sat around a lake and 9 stations. I have all of these ideas. So, but I basically have to get that shit down. So I need to like retreat for a good month just so I can get in the rhythm and the voice of it so that when I go off into my day to day, I know how to tap back into that part that's housing that story inside of me. So so those are those things. And then I think also, with my students at Colby, I'll write with them when we're doing free writes. If I'm particularly amazed by a writing exercise that I've given them and I'm like, oh my God, I want to do this as well, I'll write with them. So I'm writing with my students often. And so it's like kind of this cross training for me. So reading, revising, working on something. So right now I'm working on an opera and that's just like sucking up a lot of my energy. So I'm now in a sort of like producer, fundraiser, let me charm the money out of your pockets, please, kind of mode of being, which is entirely different than like being the creative and sitting down. So usually I'll have something that's like sort of like on stage and then on deck, and then something that's like on the shelf, all right? So right now what's on stage is the opera, what's on deck is this poetic narrative, and then what's, on the shelf is just like whatever little poems are coming up about dating, about divorce, like kind of starting to feel in the language of that space, thinking about how to write love poems that are heartbreakingly beautiful and breathtaking and breath-giving and mending, and just like puts a lot of light on those shadow parts of yourself. So all of those different stages. And movement I find to be really helpful. So starting a Kundalini practice has been really helpful, and I've been doing tarot, so like drawing tarot. So you're like, oh my God, here's like, okay, we're gonna work with the 6 of Wands. So, and see what that brings up in terms of language, in terms of how to notice the rest of my day.
Is it on? Is it working? Okay, good. Can you talk a little bit about any advice that you might have for becoming braver in your writing?
Oh my God, you should have been in my workshop today.
Oh, that's
Was that the metaphor one? No? Okay, yeah. So I think bravery. Hmm. I think the thing is it's it's like a bun, I'm ready to like have office hours with you right now. But there's a few things. It's like, what are you defining as brave? Because there's something where like, I gotta be brave. You're already that. So we have to kind of think about what's the containers you need to venture into the work that needs your voice and your body and your point of view to come into like materialization. So in that case, I would like think about, what are the things I need to feel safe? What are the things I need or people I need to like invoke in the space for myself that allows me to access that part of myself that feels open and free when talking and expressing. And I think that's the important part first. And also not to get into your editor, censor kind of mind just yet. You have to leave that to like the last thing. So I think it's really like, in some ways, setting up a container for yourself. And in this case, you have to have a daily, a sort of weekly experience. You have to keep on showing up. You have to keep on saying yes to it. So you prime your body for the yes of this, because the bravery is the yes. And so you need to make yourself welcoming for it, because it's all there, whatever it is that you're trying to get out or write or bring to language. So I think it is about establishing some kind of routine that's consistent and works for you. None of this like, oh, I'm going to sit down and do it like this every day, because that's stressful. So you have to really honor what you can do in the time that you can show up, because it will teach your body that you are reliable to this yes that you're cultivating. So that's the first thing, is like, how are you going to show up, and how are you going to show up consistently so that you're nurturing and containing this moment, this energy. And then just write. The first stage is get all of it out. And once you're there, you've done the brave part. And then from there, I think it's about finding community to help you structure, organize, help you think through the motifs and all of that shaping. But right now you have to incubate and hold it so it could be messy and expressive. And, I was saying in the workshop, one of the ways that I can tap into that voice that I love the most, which is just like free flowing and sassy and intelligent and philosophical, is when I imagine my dearest friend in the room with me. And so when that happens, I'm like, oh yeah, because she gives me that permission to just have this fluid, circular mind, and I learn how to work with that creatively in my own work without feeling like I have to edit that away and write in a certain kind of way. So find your little safeties. Does that help? Yeah. Okay.
All right, any other questions? I don't see any from Zoom, but any other last questions before we wrap up? All right, I think that'll do it. Thanks so much, Arisa, for joining us tonight. This is really fantastic.